Good Saturday morning, everyone. I thought it was about time for a shop update, so I grabbed my clipboard. Let's get into it. My most recent video was about putting rare earth magnets down in there to try to catch the arbor nut when I inevitably drop it. Got a lot of comments on this one, which was a lot of fun. And yes, I had thought about using like fencing, like chicken wire or something like that, but I don't live on a farm and I don't have any. And if I were to go to the store, I mean, how do you buy like a 6x6 chunk of fencing? But I had not thought of hardware cloth. It wasn't really on my radar. And yeah, that's probably a good idea. However, I'm still kind of curious. I think I'm just going to wait and see what the magnets do in real world. I'm really curious to see if when I inevitably drop it, and yeah, I'm just going to have to wait and see until that just sort of naturally happens. I'm really curious when I inevitably drop it if the magnet will catch it. And yeah, if the magnet doesn't catch it, then I'll probably promptly go off to the store and buy some hardware cloth or come up with something like that. In my defense, I mean, I really rebel at the thought of putting anything in the airstream because I know it's inevitably going to clog up somehow. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh no, the vibration of the saw will keep the dust off of the fencing and it's really narrow, and yeah, maybe you're right. We'll see. So a couple of people were asking, like, why did you have the dust collector on? Don't you turn that off? And I mean, the answer is basically sheer laziness, but really more than that. I don't really like to cycle the dust collector motor off and on and off and on. I don't really think that's good for it. But more than that, I mean, I move around the shop, so I'll turn on the dust collector and I'll be doing something on the joiner, and then I'll leave the joiner, and then maybe I'll go to the bandsaw, or maybe I'll come to the table saw, and I just leave it on. And you're wearing these earmuffs, and I can't even hear myself talk right now. You're wearing these earmuffs and you're concentrating on the job, and the hum of the dust collector, it just sort of disappears into the background. So sometimes I just forget it's on, and I'll all of a sudden realize that I've been standing at my bench for 20 minutes doing something and the dust collector is still going. So, but really also the idea is the magnets are always there. They're always there. There's nothing I have to do about them. You take the fallible human out of the equation, because yes, I should close my dust collector port now that I have one right underneath it. I should turn off the dust collector. You know, a couple of people are like, why don't you just put a rag there? It's like, yeah, that's kind of complicated. I'm not going to do that. You want to take the fallible human out of the equation. But anyways, it was a fun experiment. Now, speaking about the dust collector, I recently made a couple of videos where I did some improvements in my dust collector piping and system. So I'm loving this new lever that I have put here at the table saw, this lever for opening and closing the dust collector port underneath the table saw. The one thing is that it is really tucked away in here, so it's not so easy to just see at a glance. I could maybe extend this lever out just a bit. It would, the on-off switch is here, so having the lever extend out here is not really going to make it a hazard for bumping into, but we'll have to see about that. Having this other blast gate up here above bench level is awesome. I love it. The bandsaw, I haven't really done anything with that. A number of people sent me a link to a video by Rob Cosman. I'll put a link to that one up in the cards. It's really good. He's got his dust collector constricted down to about a 2-inch hose, just right tight up underneath the blade. In fact, he has a pipe that the blade cuts into. But he's using a shop vac for his dust collection, so that's very, very high velocity compared to a regular dust collector, which is, you know, high volume, not necessarily high velocity. So I thought about trying it out. You can get pipes that will constrict your 4-inch down to a 2 or 2 1/4 inch, and then I could put a section of hose there, and then I would just take all this off to get all together. I just haven't gotten around to trying it out. What I have works pretty well. It's just, you know, it wasn't quite that last little bit. And so, yeah, I might get to that at some point. It's a good idea. That Rob Cosman video is a very good video. He goes into a lot of detail on that. Now, it is still early days, but I do quite like this canister that I put on my dust collector. I don't have one of those Dylos meters that measures the particulate in the air, so I cannot give you any qualitative numbers. All I know is that, like, I used to have a fabric bag, and when you turn on the dust collector, the bag inflates and you get that puff of dust that comes off it. You could see that. And, you know, that's not happening anymore. So I believe it's better, but I can't give you any numbers. And then there was the video where I cut that table in half, and first I took this piece of maple out, and then I put this piece of cherry in, and then I cut this piece of cherry out and put another piece of cherry in. And yeah, I feel kind of dumb for not catching that earlier. Here's some of my cherry, and I've got the light on it, but this is cherry, 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 cherry. And yeah, I hope the camera's picking it up. There is a fair range of color variation in cherry in its raw, rough state. And I mean, this is not, I'm not even talking about sapwood here. This is just what you're getting. And these are maple up top. Don't worry about those. So yeah. That's all I can say. You know, it's cherry has a lot of beauty, and I love it. But there is a lot of variation in the wood, so you just have to be aware of that. And I just slipped up at the beginning of that video, but it was still a good learning experience, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. So if you follow me on Instagram, and links to that are down below, you might have caught a look at these little mini projects, which are not getting dedicated YouTube videos, but I thought I'd just show them off here for a minute. So this is built off of a ibuildit.ca John Heiss plan. You can get his free download. I'll put a link to his video and article down in the description. It's, you know, for years, like many people, I just grab a block of wood and I wrap something around it, and it seems okay. But this, I finally thought, oh, let me give this a try, because yeah, I mean, mostly I buy round sandpaper these days. I buy it round, it goes on my Orbit sander. Anyways, that's the type of sandpaper I tend to have. So I'm like, let's make a block that works with it. And this is really a really simple little thing that John designed. You have a piece of plywood, you put a bolt through it, and then you make a block that you mount on a piece of plywood. That goes on there, and you just wrap your paper around it, and you tuck the edges of the paper here, and then this just pinches it, and then you have some sort of a nut. And I diverged quite a bit from John's plan, because I had one of these 1/4 hardware kits. That's where I pulled this little T-track nut out. I filled this with epoxy to make it flat here, and I bolted this nut in there, and I made the block just to work with that size of that bolt. I drilled a bit of a recessed hole, and here's just a little knob that comes in the kit, and then I can just clamp that down. It's not a smooth top, but really when you grab it, your hand is sort of, where is it? There. Your hand is sort of arched a bit anyways. I've been surprised at how well this has worked. I've used it on this project, which I'll talk about in a second. And it's just, it holds the paper much tighter than I can, and it just lets you really concentrate on like putting pressure on the block, and it does a great job. And yeah, now I've rambled way too much on this little thing. So now this is a coaster, and I can hear you already. It's huge, and you're right. It is about 9 inches long, 4.5 inches wide. It's massive. Yeah, it is. But here's the story. So like the rest of the world, I'm working at home now. I'm at my home desk for hours at a time, and I have a glass of water there always sitting on a coaster. Just a little leather coaster that I happen to have. And once or twice a day, I might go and make myself a cup of tea, and then I'll bring that back and sit down. And then I have 2 cups and 1 coaster. And you can see where this is going. I would just grab an envelope or something, and I'd move the cup or of water or something. And I just caught myself one day going, what are you doing? And so I run down to the shop, because I'm like, I can just grab a scrap of wood and I can have a coaster quickly. And I'm looking around, and I look at my scrap bin, I look at my lumber rack, and here, let me turn the camera. Here above the door, above my head, I have one bin where I tend to put exotics or other things from cutting boards. I have several half-made cutting boards. I have sort of some unfinished trivet experiments up here. And I noticed these. I had 2 of these, now I only have 1. This is the leftover wood from this past summer when I made my most recent canoe paddle for my wife. And this was the cheeks of the paddle, because I glue up a paddle blank and then I cut the blade of the paddle thinner, and this is what's left over. And I'm like, oh, I can't throw that away, but I didn't know what to do with it, so I just tucked it up in my precious scraps bin that I have there, and it just sat there, and I kept, every now and then I'm like, oh, should I make a trivet out of it? Should I make a cutting board? Should I do this? And yeah, I come down the other day and I'm like, I want a coaster, and I look at this and I'm like, yeah, there you go, I can cut that into a coaster. And I'm like, well, I need 2 coasters, I have 2 cups, and I'm like, I'm just gonna make an extra large coaster. And yeah, this was your evening project. It took me literally 15 minutes. I came down during a coffee break, actually. Grab this, joint the one side a little bit, run it through the planer a bit to make it smooth. Take it over to the bandsaw, run a straight edge, take it over to the table saw, cut, round the edges, put on a coat of polyurethane, and I'm back at my desk. And then I pop down at lunch, put a second coat on. Towards the end of the day, I put a third coat on. And then I have, really, it's ridiculously pretty because, you know, I made this for a beautiful canoe paddle. And these are when you make something beautiful, your offcuts can be beautiful also. And it's big, yeah, but it looks kind of nice on the desk, having a splash of color like that. So that's my story. That's my extra large double-sized coaster experiment. And that's the fun of having a workshop. You can make something silly, and so what? It's mine, I like it, and that's the end of that story. So I think that's enough for this shop update. As always, thanks for stopping by and spending some time. I hope you found the stories interesting, and come back next time for a project, and we'll see you then.